If the tale of the tape is to be believed about BYU's win over TCU, the Cougars showed they're absolutely peaking at the right time.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, America's #1 sports podcast network. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we are talking about BYU's win over TCU, why it stood out to me on a film review Monday, rewatching that game. We'll also talk a little bit why BYU needs to be appreciated more, at least from my vantage point. We'll get to that. And then we'll also finish up with a film review Monday on basketball. Tough, gritty loss for BYU against UConn in Boston, but a lot of good things came out of that, and we'll get into all of that ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticketing purchase. All right, so rewatching BYU's game against TCU, if what they showed against the Horned Frogs is legitimately what BYU is going to be the rest of the way this regular season at minimum, they're not going to lose another game, everybody. I'll just say that right at the outset. It was absolutely incredible to watch how dominant they were. And I'm talking from the very start of that game. That very first drive, I know that Parker Kingston dropped a touchdown pass that was right in his mitts. But outside of that, really, BYU set a tone and did not relent for the next 3 quarters plus and showed exactly what you wanted to see from BYU coming off a very tough loss to Texas Tech. A lot of you out there, yours truly included, wondered, okay, did this BYU team learn its lesson a season ago when they let the Kansas game bleed in to that loss against Arizona State that ultimately cost them what they hoped to accomplish a season ago? Well, if what they showed against TCU does not prove that they did learn that lesson, I don't know what's going to teach you that. I really was impressed. The offensive and defensive lines, I thought, had their best performance top to bottom across the board. Guys like Keanu Tanuvasa, Waylon Lapuaho before he left injured and was held out for precautionary reasons. I thought guys like Andrew Gentry, they absolutely owned the trench warfare in this game. And I also got to give a special shout out. If you did not see it on Saturday night, I hope you did, because they were hard to miss. Guys like Tausili Akana, Nusi Taumoi Apeau, Kendall Wall, Hunter Clegg, man, the edges for BYU that are young right now. Oh, Kinilao Fonohema, I also should mention him. He saw some time as well. The future of the defensive end position for BYU, while they're young and they're a little bit skinny, the future is very bright. And Tausili Akana in particular, his reads were absolutely masterful. He made some incredible plays. And then I got to give a shout out to Nusi. Late in this game, had a big stop on that. Was a 3rd and short, I think, for TCU before they had the back-to-back false starts, and it was a snap infraction that pushed them back. And then he follows that up with a sack. That's some really special stuff we're seeing from some of these young edge players for BYU, and just added to what I took away from BYU's dominance on the front lines in this game. The other thing we need to appreciate, I think, a little bit more rewatching this game is we're watching Bear Bachmeier ascend into superstar status right before our very eyes. And I don't need to say that myself without having some backup here. So let's throw this up here, let you guys see this. This is from collegefootballgraphs.com, and I'm going to make this full screen for those of you watching this on YouTube. But if you look at the metrics here, you can go to CFB it's not College Football Graphs, CFB numbers, excuse me. They use the data from both ESPN's QB rating as well as the PFF grades for these players. And what you're looking at here, I'm going to go full screen, so hopefully you guys can see the full layout here. But even if I can't get it to go here, the point is, if you look right up in that very top right corner where the best players weekly are located, yeah, that's Bear Bachmeier. He was the best quarterback by both PFF metrics and ESPN's QB rating system, and that he is outdoing guys like the presumptive Heisman Trophy frontrunner in Fernando Mendoza, guys like Dante Moore. We're talking essentially the who's who of quarterbacking in college football, and little old Bear Bachmeier from Brigham Young University was the best in the country this past week. Absolutely incredible stuff we're watching from a guy that I think is going to be a special player for BYU, and we're watching it in real time. He has led BYU to a 9-1 record. Remember, this time last year, I think I remind many of you, he was a high school senior. It's absolutely remarkable what he's accomplished here. The funny thing about this, rewatching this game, it was a relatively quiet night for BYU's linebacking core rewatching this game, and it's because the defensive line was just absolutely owning. And it's kind of more of what you want to see from this Jay Hill-led defense. You want to see the defensive line own the game the way they did in that matchup. And I think an evidence of that dominance for BYU was that TCU did not have a third down conversion until we were into the third quarter of this game. They went the entirety of the first half plus a little bit more before they finally got a third down conversion. And I know there was some chatter. I saw it on social media sitting in the press box on Saturday night. Jay Hill's defense is yielding too many yards. Okay, let me reiterate a point here. Yards are one thing. They are not points. You can give up as many yards between the 20s, and that seems like what Jay Hill is fine to yield. But you get into scoring territory, maybe the 30-yard line and in, and especially the 20-yard, the red zone, that defense for BYU, they're lights out. And yeah, you've given up 13 points to a team like TCU that's got a pretty prolific offense, one of the best wide receivers in the conference, if not the country, Eric McAllister. Yeah, they can pile up all the stats they want between those 20s, but you get in the scoring territory and you limit them to 13 points, that's dominance. Really, really good signs for BYU's defense on that front. A few other things I noticed in this game. Really liked what I saw from Faletau Satuola. He's become a bit of a unicorn because at 6'4", 205, 210 pounds, whatever he weighs, there are very few safeties who have the height, the size, and the range that he has because you just don't see it. They're more the size of a Tanner Wall. And Tanner Wall, by the way, what an incredible play that was for that young man. I think it was just kind of the culmination of years and years of hard work for him to get that pick six. Awesome to see that. But safeties typically are more Tanner Wall size. We're watching an absolute unicorn in Faletau Satuola. And I'll admit, I have been a person, any of you who have talked to me offline about this, I've kind of thought that the long-term projection for Faletau was to essentially kind of move into that strong side linebacker role that Isaiah Glasker is currently occupying. I don't think that's necessarily the case at this point. I think you keep him at strong safety. He's been absolutely awesome in that role, and I don't see a reason to move him out of that. Few things that stood out to me as well in terms of just quirky small things. Some of you may have noticed that there was a tight end wearing the number 95 in that game. Well, that's BYU offensive guard Trevin Osler, who is wearing that number so he can play tight end for BYU in this offense. It's something that other programs like Utah have utilized this season, and it's absolutely a welcome addition to BYU's playbook. A guy like Trevin has an extra 300-pounder to block, and any of you know who his background, he is a former three-sport athlete at Bountiful High School. So I think he got the athleticism to offer some things on the edge that BYU may be lacking at that tight end position, especially in run sets. So it was kind of funny to see that. And then the final thing I've got for you guys on this in terms of corrections or improvements I'd like to see. I got three things for you guys. Drops remain a minor issue. We had Parker drop the touchdown pass. Also had another one go right off the hands of JoJo Phillips. Those need to still continue to be cleaned up. Running back depth for me overall is still a concern. LJ was absolutely awesome in this game. He is far and away BYU's number one bell cow running back. But beyond that, I saw some flashes from Enoch Nawahine in terms of pass protection, run blocking. I just don't see it with anybody like him carrying the football. I still think you need to have a complementary back to what LJ's doing. And Jovessa Demouni at this point, I don't know if he's in witness protection program. He's injured. I don't know what it is, but we have not seen him. Also, Sione Moa is still on the shelf. So maybe it's just going to be the LJ show and you figure out what you're going to do from there. And then the final thing is the QB draw from Bear Bachmeier has been an absolute weapon for BYU all season long. Scattering report is out on it, and BYU's got to find a counter to that. Whether it's he fakes the draw, steps back, kind of that play action look, tosses a pass over the top to a guy like Carson Ryan. That's got to be the next iteration of utilizing that play to keep teams from keying it on it so heavily in that circumstance. And also, I'll just give a word of like props to a guy like Carson Ryan. He was kind of unleashed in this game. Wasn't being forced to stay in on max protects. And I'm telling you, he's an absolute weapon. And I think BYU, I think you kind of just throw, it's not caution to the wind, but the max protect stuff anymore. I think Bear Bachmeier is finally at the point 10 games into the season that you don't need to bring 7 and 8 man protections to keep him upright. Against a team like Texas Tech, yeah, I understand why you did it, but it hurts you in your chance to even be competitive in that game. I think you got to go with a whole different mindset. And a guy like Carson Ryan is an absolute weapon in the passing game. You need to utilize him. All right, so there you go. That's what I took away from my film review here on a Monday. But there is something that stood out to me more than anything else on Saturday night, rewatching this game. And we're going to talk about it next. And I'm going to step right onto the soapbox, and I'm just going to call a spade, and we'll get to that momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game you want to watch or want to ride the hot hand in-game, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks and quite literally anything else you're interested in. Plus, you can combine those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout along the way. Keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push, much like the Utah Jazz last night against the Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about Keontae George. What a absolutely incredible three-pointer that was. That's beside the point. But right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel. Once again, $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet win. It's all courtesy of FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. All right, going to give a quick shout out to some Cougar fans who said hi at LaVell Edwards Stadium on Saturday night. And I mentioned them on Saturday night late in the podcast, but I wanted to make sure they didn't miss it. So I want to give a shout out to Chris, Lon and Elise, Matt and Linda, Lincoln, Dave, and Mark, who all said hello on Saturday night. And appreciate you guys saying hello. And there were a handful more of you who said, "Hey, Jake Hatch, love the show." Like as you're walking past, if you get a chance, stop me. I'm always willing to stop, chat for a minute, and dap you up and say hello. So appreciate all the support. It really is cool to be out among Cougar Nation and get to know some of y'all as we roll along here this season. All right, so there's an interesting dynamic at play here with BYU, and you're looking at it. If you look at the college football playoff projections, there are some that are still holding out hope that the Big 12 is going to get 2 teams into the college football playoff. Now, there are more and more who are believing that it's going to be the SEC Invitational. They're going to have 5 teams in the playoff. I saw projections from Brett McMurphy that had 5 SEC teams, 3 Big 10 teams, and then 1 each from the Big 12, ACC, Notre Dame, and the G6, whoever the top G6 team is. Okay, if that's the way we're going to go in college football, then just tell us that we are essentially second-class citizens, speaking of BYU and others outside of the so-called Power 2 leagues. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I know that the combination of wins on Saturday have a lot of those people projecting it to give the advantage to the SEC. And it's exactly what guys like Greg Sankey absolutely want. But I want to give a shout out to Tosh McIntosh. You probably have seen him if you watched the Loyal Cougars podcast, which I guess hosted last week. But he pointed this out. He says, we need to call the selection committee and ESPN on their crap of trying to marginalize BYU. Only 4 teams have 5 wins over bowl-eligible opponents right now. Those would be Indiana, okay, easily, number 2 team in the country. I don't have a problem saying that. Ohio State, defending champs. They did nothing to stop themselves from being number 1 in the country. I'd have no problem with those 2. Alabama, okay, well, Alabama, okay, I get that. They have the 5 wins. And then little old BYU. He says BYU is the number 6 resume in the country. Nor that this should matter, but it's not a fluke. Last year, they finished with the number 7 resume. That mentions the committee, speaking of the College Football Playoff Committee, needs to do their job and rank the teams according to merit and data. Amen and amen, Tosh. Here's the deal. BYU has put together an incredible resume this season. And I did see somebody sent me a link, or it was actually a clip of I think it was Salt Lake Tribune article. And it has a Utah fan saying that Utah should be ahead of BYU in the college football playoff ranks, or should be in the playoff over BYU, because BYU's only played one decent team and lost to them. I think you're telling on yourself, Mr. Utah fan there. Did you not think that through? You just said that your team, speaking of Utah, is no good. The logic kind of befalls themselves at times. But the bigger point is, we are watching a really, really good football team in BYU. And I know that Texas Tech game has stuck in the craw of some people out there in the national media thinking that BYU might be a pretender. But don't you want to see them bounce back in emphatic fashion with quite possibly, in my opinion, the most complete, most thorough, most dominant win of the season the following week? Because that's exactly what BYU did in beating TCU on Saturday night. I said it in the open of today's show. If this BYU team, what they showed against TCU is to be believed, we are watching a team that's peaking at the right time. And if ESPN's FPI or other metrics are to be believed, BYU has a 60+% chance of going to Cincinnati this week, winning that game, and then somewhere between 85 and 95% chance of beating UCF the following week. And I said it Saturday night. I'll reiterate it here. Really, the only thing you need to worry about for BYU right now when it comes to their Big 12 fate is to win, and you are in. There is nothing that Utah, ASU, Houston, who else is in the mix there? Cincinnati, BYU's opponent this week. They all have 2 conference losses. So long as BYU keeps winning, there's not a darn thing, as Coach Prime likes to say, that any of those schools can do to stop BYU from playing in Arlington, Texas in 3 weeks' time. That is an exciting proposition, but we need to see the College Football Playoff Committee step up and tell the SEC and the Big Ten, no, there are other conferences out there who've got really, really good football teams. There are top-tier programs, and I think Texas Tech is absolutely the top shelf, the best that the Big 12 can offer, and I think they're capable of making a run in the playoff. But this BYU team, if what they showed against TCU and what you hope they show against Cincinnati this week, and then finishing off the season against UCF, if what they have put on tape recently, this TCU game included, this is a BYU team that deserves a whole lot more respect than they are getting right now from some of the talking heads nationally. Am I holding my breath that they're going to realize their folly and be like, oh, sorry, BYU? No, because we saw the very same thing happen a season ago. Remember, when BYU lost to Kansas a season ago, they dropped like a stone from 6-14. Well, they lost to Texas Tech this year. They dropped, it's not as far, from 7-12, a 5-spot drop, which was unprecedented so far in what the College Football Playoff Committee has put out there in terms of losses and the like. I understand. SEC, Big Ten, they control the narratives because they have the 2 major networks in their back pocket. But I also do respect the fact that BYU is, I think it was Y for Life or one, I might have been a couple other people pointed out, 25% of BYU's games this season, of the 12 that they're going to play, had either Big Noon Kickoff or ESPN's College Game Day broadcasting at those locations. That includes this week at Cincinnati. If that's not a mark of respect for a team that I think is pretty darn good, and you may want to call me biased because I'm hosting a show talking about BYU as a BYU graduate, great. Go right on ahead. But by any discernible metric out there, this is a football team, speaking of BYU, that A, has earned more respect than it's getting, and B, should be talked about more fully as a team that, if they get the right draw in the college football playoff, could be a problem for some of those teams in the Big Ten, the SEC, heck, even Notre Dame. Like, I'm not saying they're going to win, but BYU is rounded into shape at the very, very time you want them to do that, because I was super impressed with that TCU performance, and it showed me this team, they talked about the fact that they learned from their mistakes a season ago, allowing 2 losses to kind of build on each other. They did not let that happen this season. They shook off a really, really tough loss to Texas Tech, and they want nothing more than another crack at the Red Raiders. And so long as they keep winning, they're going to get that shot, and in theory, should be very much in the at-large conversation for the college football playoff by the time that game comes. But at the same time, we'll see if the playoff committee will step up and do the right thing. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious to see what those new playoff rankings look like tomorrow night when they come out, because I do expect BYU moves up 1 spot this week. They should be 11, but the math says you're going to have to be number 9 or probably higher to essentially lock in an at-large berth going into conference championship weekend. Will that happen? TBD, but I'll be here stumping for BYU the whole way down the stretch here. Now, conversely, if BYU stumbles and loses at Cincinnati, they hurt themselves, and that makes me look like a fool. So I can acknowledge both sides of this, but the way BYU played against TCU, you replicate that performance, I don't think they're losing again this regular season, and it'll set up, I think, a pretty highly anticipated rematch against Texas Tech in Arlington, Texas. All right, coming up next, a Film Review Monday rolls on. Flipping over to basketball, though. I rewatched BYU's loss to UConn, and I'll just say this. The Cougars, they got fight, and I'll explain exactly more of what I took away from that comeback attempt in a 2-point loss coming up next. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. I want to remind you guys today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. College football is back. The best part is the tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's literally nothing like it. It's infectious. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and a lot more. That's why I want you guys to do what I do and use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay, and the best part is you can get in and see exactly what your seat view is going to be in the app. As I mentioned, the price you see right when you open the app is exactly what you're going to pay. There's no surprise fees being tacked on. They also add the zone deals that are awesome as well. You pick the section, they pick the seats, you save money along the way. So take advantage of this today, my friends. Take the guesswork at buying your college football tickets and do it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, it's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Make sure you subscribe to it and get the inside intel that you crave about all things BYU football and basketball coming to your phone in the form of a text message. I will be passing along everything I know about BYU, and it comes to our Insider Group members first. So if you want to join that, link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away as a new member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, so BYU basketball is now 3-1 on the season, and we'll see the new rankings when they come out today. You'll probably see maybe a spot or two drop for BYU from number 7 to maybe 8 or 9, but they battled against the number 3 team against UConn. And rewatching this game, I'm telling you, the first half to second half disparity, and quite honestly, the final 10 minutes or so for BYU, it was absolutely remarkable how they transformed in an instant, it felt like, in that game. The biggest thing I took away from this game is that the first half, you rewatch it, and I saw it also Saturday just watching that game live. AJ DeBonsa, he was pressing. He absolutely was pressing. He can tell you anything he wants otherwise, but if you watch how he performed in that first half, you could tell he had a lot of family and friends in the stands there at TD Garden, and he was forcing it. And that obviously, I think, hurt BYU's chances in this game, because when you get down by his, I think it was a 20-point lead with 15 minutes to go in the game. So first 35 minutes, really, really tough scenes for BYU and AJ himself. But I'm telling you, final 15 minutes, if that's the AJ DeBonsa we're going to be treated to all season long, going to be a whole lot of fun, because he absolutely looked like the force you have been wanting to see, speaking of Cougar fans who have spent months, if not years, waiting to see a guy like this suit up for the BYU Cougars. He made multiple moves that had Bill Raftery just absolutely dying over calling the game. And I know that Bill's kind of slowing down a little bit, but you could tell he was thoroughly enjoying what BYU put on the tape there. One thing that helped BYU get back into this game, they got UConn in foul trouble very, very early on in that second half, and those free throws were critical to helping BYU kind of whittle away at that 20-point lead. And I will also say this, whatever game plan that UConn utilized in that second half, it looked like Aaron Roderick's fourth quarter offense for BYU football. And any of you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. They were killing clock, running kind of ISO sets, and Bill, and I think it was Brandon Godin, who was calling the game. They were like, why are these guys wasting so much time and getting down to like 10 seconds before they really initiate any action? It was trying to kill the clock. And to their credit, it worked out. It did. They won the game. So credit to UConn, but I'm telling you, they hurt themselves with that methodical, slow plotting, let 20 seconds tick away, and then finally try and figure something out on the fly. It really did look in some ways like an Aaron Roderick fourth quarter offense, and when BYU was trying to take the air out of the football in some of these games. So That was one thing that helped BYU. Richie Saunders, his craftiness, he is a wily player to try and defend. And it's kind of an unorthodox style of play, and it's really, really tough to defend. And I like the fact that I said it Saturday night. I still want to see more assists. I think it was 7 assists on 29 made field goals. Less than 25% assist rate is not good enough in long term in college basketball. You need to have more 50% plus, ideally. So they need to work on that. But the ball sharing that was happening with BYU's players, Richie, Rob Wright, AJ DeBonsa as their top 3 guys, I did enjoy that in the second half. They allowed each other to kind of play off of one another, but at the same time, not impede each other as well. But it absolutely showed that AJ, he is an absolute alpha of the highest order. I was really, really impressed with him. The other thing BYU utilized in that second half to get back into the game was the pressure, full court, half court, the trapping. A lot of that was clinical. And I think it's Will Voigt, who is BYU's defensive coordinator, now the associate head coach, if I recall correctly. They put on a clinic. And I got to give a shout out to guys like Dominic Diomande, AJ DeBonsa, Rob Wright. That takes effort. When you're pressing teams, any of you who have played basketball at any level, and I don't proclaim to be an expert on basketball, I will never be that, but any of you who have played basketball at any level and tried to press teams, it takes a lot out of it. It takes a whole lot of energy you have to expend on that end of the court. And it helped BYU get back into this game because it forced UConn with some overthrows, some out of bounds plays. And it was really good to see them show that they're capable of forcing the action like that. And then I guess the final thing that I'll add is that BYU had a chance. I think it was 10 seconds to go. And Rob Wright, he went with a between the legs move that he's probably done 1,000 times in his basketball playing days to this point in his life, and just got caught underneath him. And that turnover, it did BYU's chances of pulling off the comeback in. And it's unfortunate because it was actually an action. If you rewatch the play, it looked like he was going to kind of drive and kick. And the way BYU was shooting in that final stanza, who's going to say that ball wouldn't have gone down? It's just ifs and buts for candy and nuts. We'd all have a Merry Christmas. I get that. But it was a really, really heady, hardy, gritty, grimy performance for BYU. But it was spearheaded by the 3 guys you wanted to see take control of that game in AJ, Richie, and Rob. And to do it without your other 2 starters in Kennard Davis Jr. and Keba Keita, still even better. And they had to go small ball for a long stretch of that second half. They had Hadim Mboop running kind of that 5 spot, and his versatility, being able to switch out on the perimeter, that really helped BYU. They were able to switch 1 through 5, and it was really, really cool to see that from the BYU basketball team because they easily could have, 15 minutes, 20-point lead for UConn, said, all right, whatever, guys, let's wave the white flag. But that's when they turned the Jets on and really showed the tenacity you want to see from a team like that. I know that it's a loss. Obviously, you chalk it up in the L column the first time this season for BYU basketball, but that is a performance, especially in that final 15, maybe 10 minutes, that they'll be able to think back on and say, okay, we made it about as tight as you possibly can make it, grinding our way back from 20 points down and nearly had a chance to win it against UConn. Why can't we do that in any other game this season? That's going to be a building moment for this roster for BYU basketball that I really do believe that is going to make them much, much better this season going forward than had they, like I said, waved the white flag down 20 and absorb maybe a 25 or a 30-point loss. Really, really impressive stuff. And Kevin Young said, he said, stacking days includes tough days and tough losses like that. But that performance, the second half, it's something to hang your hat on for BYU. And yeah, no moral victories, but still, really, really good signs for this BYU basketball team, even though there still needs to be improvement. 3-point shooting, as I said, the assist to turnover ratio, assist rate on made field goals. There's a whole lot for BYU to still improve upon, but they got this whole week leading up to a showdown at the Delta Center against Wisconsin on Friday afternoon. And I'm sure they'll be working on a lot of those things. But as I mentioned, really, really heady, impressive stuff from BYU to grind their way back into that game and make UConn sweat. You could tell that UConn was melting down a little bit there in that game. That's a big credit to the Cougars for making them do that very thing that they endeavored to do. And that really is a nice sign for the Cougars along the path here. So, all right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show, Film Review Monday. Coming up tomorrow, we are going to talk about what to expect from the college football playoff rankings. There was also a guy over the weekend, if you didn't see it, Ulavai Fatuli, he goes by Vi Fatuli, was baptized as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I didn't know that he was getting baptized. I actually interviewed him last week ahead of this baptism to get to know him a little bit. He's a reserve defensive tackle for BYU, but seeing more and more time as the season goes along. Well, we're going to play that interview for you guys tomorrow. It's an exclusive one-on-one chat you won't hear anywhere else, and looking forward to that. So stay tuned for that coming up on tomorrow's edition of the podcast. And as always, thank you for subscribing, rating, reviewing, and just being a part of this audience. If you haven't done so already on YouTube, there's a little thumbs up icon right over here. Click that. And if you're listening to it, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, there's other ways to like the show. Like I said, rate and review it. And simply put, just sharing it with a family and friend that might be a Cougar fan that doesn't know about this outlet. Hey, that in and of itself is much appreciated. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And we'll catch you guys again tomorrow as an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.